Hey Gabe, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jackie. I'm very excited to chat through MK Ultra and share every mistake I've made across the way.
Gabe is founder of Exposure. He used to work at Eucalyptus beforehand and does everything performance creative for his agency. He's been building his own tools to level up his capability and sent me a Loom the other day with the product he built, and I felt like it had to be shared with everybody. So wanted to dive in and talk a bit more about your background, your experience, and what you're building.
Perfect. And if there's any developers watching this, I do apologize. Yeah.
We'll just go quick from the beginning.
All right, sweet. So, yeah, got into photography when I was 17, became Sony's youngest brand ambassador. And then from there, I started working with like some of the biggest agencies in Australia, working on massive ad campaigns. I realized like how slow traditional advertising is. You have an idea, by the time it goes live, it's 6 months down the line, and you're spending 50K testing it, and sometimes it won't even resonate. During COVID, I obviously lost a lot of my overseas clients, so moved to start getting work with Australian clients, and then joined a company called Eucalyptus. Yeah, over there, I learned everything about performance. They taught me so incredibly much about ads and testing ideas, and then graduating into TVCs. But there was this thing that we like constantly ran into every time we engaged a creative agencies. There's always this thing about like brand versus performance. And I'll be honest, like 3 years ago, I was very much on the performance side of it and hated brand. But now working with larger brands, I completely understand there's a space for brand activities. But during there, we used to do a lot of like manual scraping, trying to find what the customers were saying, what they were putting in Trustpilot reviews, what they were putting in, Reddit threads, compared to ad accounts, because those things we called like golden nugget reviews. We're trying to find out what pain points they talked about and then address those in the ads so we could, you know, press on a bruise or whatever you want to call it to get them to convert into a customer. The good thing about when I was doing that in house, you've got one brand that you're focusing on and you understand everything about it. As soon as you launch an agency, you've got like 15 to 30 different brands, and every single month you're getting new companies come in, right? So the issue that I was facing was, if you look at an agency, right, and you pull away all the ego, it's a glorified recruitment agency. That's all we do. We find the best talent in the world, and then we, train them up and then sell their services to clients. What I realized was we were paying creative strategists $75 US per hour to go through Reddit forums, to go through Trustpilot reviews, like very manual tasks that could be automated. So then we started this NAN workflow. So every time a client would fill out an onboarding form, it'd punch out this automation that would set off like 30 different things, cost me a whole bunch of APIs, like credits, had no idea what was going on. And then we'd get this final Google Doc, and then we'd have to format that for Notion, chuck it into Claude. There's this whole process. So our initial creative strategy would always take a week. And when you're paying someone $75 US per hour, that's a very expensive week. So I thought, how can I speed that up? A lot of this stuff could be automated, could be manual. I then started building something on Lovable. Yeah, and then I hung out with you, Jackie, and the developers, and everyone was talking about how they wouldn't recommend Lovable after I spent, I think it was like 500 US on credits in one night, So decided to make the switch to Claude Code. And my buddy Unabove came over the next morning after our lunch and set it all up for me. I started using Warp. This like, I don't even know what the technical terms are. I know nothing about code. He set up Claude on Warp, and I've just been talking to it till like 4 a.m. every single night. It's kind of like, the way I explained it to my missus was, this has been like the biggest unlock in the last 2 years of running Exposure, because every idea I've had, I can now execute on. And I remember when I started Exposure, like what Eucalyptus really instilled into me is like the time you can reduce from ideation to execution is like that gap you want to close out as much as possible. Claude Code now allows me to do that. I wish they were paying me for this, but yeah, I'm such a fanboy. But anyway, so then what we started to figure out was, okay, what if we could collate all of the data? Because if you think about an agency, right? what is a moat? What's stopping another Gabe from XU or wherever from starting his own little agency? He needs a laptop and an internet connection. That's it, right? So when you look at like agencies and their moat, there's not really that much. Like, yes, there's talent. Yes, there's ways of working, all of that kind of stuff. But what if I could build a system that tapped into 2 years worth of ad spend data, that looked at $200 million worth of ad spend, looked at all the top performers in Australia, broke them down frame by frame, and used that as like an essential cheat sheet so we could verify whether or not an ad would be likely to perform before it went live. And then another thing I realized as well is some of the clients we work with sell very expensive products. So every time there's like a failed ad test, it's not production costs they're losing. They're also losing $600 in ad spend on Meta per ad. Some of our clients are making 400 ads for. The best agencies in the world have a 30% hit rate. You can imagine how much wasted ad spend if you're not hitting 30 to 40%. So we train this AI tool based off all that data and then also through our ways of working. So now whenever we like make a brief, we've got this tool. My dad hates the name. It's a bit controversial, but I named it MK Ultra after the CIA mine experiment in the 70s. Yeah, it's stuck. So yeah, the app's called MK Ultra.
Hey, so I might bring you up a level a moment for like all the people who don't know what people do in ad agencies. So like if you could just break it down, I think like it would be awesome to hear, I guess, what a traditional agency does, how you were working differently at Exposure before you were able to build your own software. And then I would love to hear like a little bit more about, I guess, like the day you got started with Claude Code and like what you actually did.
100%. I'll happily tell you that day. Yeah, it's so vivid in my memory. I was like, what can't it do? I was trying to push it to its absolute limits, but I'll start at the beginning. All right, so your traditional agency, depending on what kind of, I look at agencies as like any kind of career, any niche is a tree trunk, and then there's these like little, branches going out. So you have your PR agencies, you have your TVC agencies, your branding, your media buying. What I realized when I started my first agency when I think I was like 16 and a half, was that I will never be able to compete with the big dogs that are looking after the TVCs for like, Apple and all of those kind of brands. But then I watched this movie, Jackie, it's called War Dogs. I don't know if you've seen it,
Yeah,
but
I have, yeah.
yeah, I fucking love that movie. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah,
Maybe
of course.
bleep it out. Yeah. But with that movie there's this scene and they're talking about how everyone's fighting for a big piece of the pie, but there's enough crumbs to add up to a big piece. So I took the same idea with Exposure. I looked at every big ad agency in Australia, saw that none of them were focusing on like paid performance ads. They were all doing TVC. They were all doing UGC, like influencer content. They were all doing branding. But no one was going for this. So that's why I built it around this. And even while working in-house, I, had this moment where we were using, I think it was like 6 or 7 different creative agencies. And it was like when you go into a contemporary art gallery and you see banana taped onto the wall and you're like, I could have done that. I had that feeling way too many times. So we took a lot of the content in-house. We built up a team of like 20 to 40 people in Manila, trained them all up on the ways of working. And then, Mingle Seasoning was my first client while I was working at Uke. And then I just realized I missed the variety. Yeah, so yeah.
And what's the process from like start to finish when you work with the client today?
For sure. So right now, I think the majority of our time goes into that initial creative strategy. Our internal tool has definitely sped that up. But essentially what we're trying to do is whenever a client comes to us, we're never going to know, even if we do it all manually, we will never know their customers as well as they do. So we jump on a call with them. We get as much information as we can. We get these like ridiculously long onboarding forms. I had a client send me a message once saying it took 40 minutes to fill out, but we just get as much data as we can. We then take all that data and we fire off 16 consecutive, I don't know what the technical term is, like bots or agents or workflows. So then we start scraping the entire internet. And all we're trying to do, not the entire internet, but as much as we can. And all we're trying to do is figure out where their customers hang out. And then we start to bucket their customers so we know exactly who we're talking to. Because if you talk to everyone, you're talking to no one. I'll show you some examples in a sec. But then we're trying to figure out, what do they say when they're frustrated? What do they say when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're talking about a problem? What kind of jargon do they use? So then when we make the ads, Meta can pick up on that language and serve it to the customers that have already been consuming that type of content. So we're trying to look on dark socials. I call them dark socials, but wherever someone can hang out under like an alias. So that's Reddit, because then people can tell you exactly how they feel. A lot of people like to look at 5-star reviews and 1-star, but anyone that does a 1-star like hates the brand. Anyone that does a 5-star is like me with Claude, a fanboy. You're never going to get any info out of that. So we try to look for those in between, and then we have a minimum of like 120 characters. So they've gotten into effort trying to talk about their problems or their issues. So yeah, we pick up on that, and then it's purely just figuring out, they've got, 10,000 customers. Their competitors also have X amount of customers, and we just put them into different buckets. So the first round of content, we're going and targeting all demographics. So we do like 2 ads per demographic, 2 ads that we know work based off all that other data and the formats we know that works. And then whatever demographic reacts the hardest to that, we double down as much as we can. So we put 80% of the next month's effort into that demographic. And then that 20% remaining budget, if we have like a theory or we want to test something or there's a new format coming out, we, run that. Yeah.
Nice. Well, this might be actually, like when you were describing that, you're kicking off your agents to go search Reddit. Like, how did you even get started there? Like, you didn't write software before this, you didn't know how to write code. Like, how did you even just like sit down with Claude Code and describe what you wanted, and what was that process?
That's a great question. We used to do it all manually, so I know the process really well. And then what I do, Jackie, is I record myself and I just talk to myself for like an hour. My missus thinks I'm a bit of a skit sitting in a dark room at 2 a.m. talking, but what's it called? I get as much detail as I can. And then after the lunch we had with the developers, I used to put everything in a PDF format. They told me to put it in a .md. So highly suggest that. That's sped everything up so much. And then I just get our whole SOPs. I've got every single thing we do in the company documented on Notion, and every single thing each individual does documented. And then I feed that into Claude Code on Warp and say, spin up some agents and tell me any gaps in the business. What can we automate? What, NAN workflow can we move to MK Ultra? So everything's super, super documented. At the beginning, I was so against that. I thought it was like a false sense of doing work by sitting down and documenting stuff. I never understood it. But now I definitely do. Yeah, especially because that one document has, created a whole app for us. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, I'd love it if you would be okay to share screen and show us a bit of the product, and like in particular, it would be really helpful if you kind of talk through from the lens of like, what is automating stuff you already did and how long did that take before, and then also what is this enabling that you were never able to do before, and like how does that enable you to kind of just completely level up your capability?
For sure. Yeah, sweet. I'll start sharing my screen. Can you see that there?
Yep, got it.
Cool, sweet. All right, so this is one of our clients. They're a men's hormone clinic. I'm going to take you through some of the creative strategy it did for them. So we've got a couple of our clients here on the main dashboard. By the way, Jackie, none of this I did. It was all Claude. It was just me chatting to Claude. And also another thing I really want to flag, I moved all of this to Claude Bot because it was all the rage. Everyone was talking about Claude Bot, how incredibly exceptional it is. I did that. Do not recommend. It broke everything. I didn't even realize you could restore from a backup. So I spent 5 days trying to burn through thousands of like dollars worth of credits trying to bring it back to where it was. And then my buddy was like, "Oh, you can just do a backup from Versal." So I did that. So yeah, Claude Bot for this kind of stuff, I wouldn't recommend. But yeah, Claude Code, exceptional. So here's some of our clients. I'll pop up one of them as an example. So this is Hormone. They're a men's health clinic. And it syncs to our Notion. So every time our copywriter writes a brief, it can pick up on the language that we're using in this script over here. and then verify whether or not it will perform, and whether or not it has a high likelihood of performing. And if I open up this one here, we can see the different buckets that I talked about earlier. So for someone to manually do this and not make too many mistakes, it could take upwards of a week. It's a lot of work, and they will be using AI anyway. So
And so how is it analyzing what will perform and what won't perform?
So we've got this document. I probably can't share that because it's internal client data, but it's just over the past 2 years, every time we made a set of ads for a client, the top 5 performing ads we've taken into Google Gemini and done a frame by frame breakdown. So everything's broken down by the colors that the talent's wearing in the first couple of seconds, where they are, what location it is, any recurring themes across all of that. So whenever we do, write the scripts and then check them on this, it uses that doc as a source of truth. Yeah.
Amazing.
So yeah, this is the consumer intelligence part. I'll quickly show you the buckets of personas I was talking about earlier. So it buckets them into 5 different ones, sometimes more. You can always add more if you need, but this is always great. So this for hormone, it's a system escapees. So men who have been dismissed and gaslit by traditional GPs who tell them their symptoms are in the normal aging or their testosterone levels are fine when they clearly aren't. And then we've got a snapshot here about them, a bit about the demographic. This is really good, Jackie, because some of our copywriters could be a 30-year-old female. They do not relate to TRT supplementation, and this just gives them a cheat code to understand where someone's mindset might be. We've got males writing scripts for females clothing brands. This gives them a lot of insight into who the customer is and what they want, what they fear, what they've actually said, so we can pick up on all those different Reddit forums and Trustpilot reviews, what they'll push back on, angles that work. And then this one has been the biggest unlock, which is specific situations, because these aren't necessarily things that they've put in reviews, but from analyzing the reviews, we can pick up on, where they would have been when they had that experience. So, sitting and showing his wife a blood test result saying, see, I knew something was wrong. So then that way we can visually show that in the ad without having to verbally say it. Yeah. So this is just one of the 5, goes into super detailed. And then in their words, so the whole idea behind this, Jackie, is you're just trying to pull words from their mouth and then place it in the script so you can say, we understand you, we understand what you're talking about, what your issues are, all of that kind of stuff. Because with the content we make, we're writing it from a customer's perspective. It's user-generated content, so it looks like it's coming from, someone who's been in the same shoes they have. So it's more relatable, if anything. We then bucket it into, relieved, frustrated, excited, hopeful, anxious, angry, confused. So when our copywriters do eventually write the scripts, we can come over here and say, when they're frustrated, what do they say? So I was nearly 40, depressed and felt like crap. Cool. That's such a good hook because that's something that's come up in the research. Let's use that in the first 3 seconds. So, little stuff like that has been massive. How they talk, we can figure out, when they're talking about a problem, a jargon, solution. This is very different per country. In America, they wouldn't be saying GP, so we can pick up on the language that's used locally. Telehealth, test levels, in range, all that kind of stuff. What they say when they talk about a solution, an emotion, something that made them, trigger a purchase or sign up or whatever. So a friend put me onto it. So that's great. It subconsciously tells the viewer that this company has a lot of word of mouth and, herd mentality. People like to follow other people when they think it's safe. Got our different themes, what keeps them up at night, what do they want, why they hesitate, words that actually work. So this is all from all of our documents for the past, 2 years, constantly refining how we talk to AI and, AI platforms. But it's crazy, Jackie, because we just created this Claude bot on my other computer over here. I've put some code on it so it runs even when the lid's shut. But this one's just scouring the internet. So anyone who's an authority figure in, D2C land, in paid performance land, they love to flex their best performing ads on Twitter or any breakdowns and stuff like that. So this just scours Twitter and LinkedIn to pick up on any new bit of content they're releasing every single week, and then gives us suggestions on how we can improve our workflows. So it's nuts. Like,
Nice.
yeah, trying to have someone do that full time, there's always room for error. This just minimizes it as much as we can. So yeah, what I really want to show you, which we haven't launched yet because it's not the best, but every time we have a meeting with a client, we can pop in meeting notes and it can adjust the creative strategy accordingly. So let's say a client goes, hey, we're in Australia. The TGA doesn't allow us to talk about TRT on ads. We can upload that feedback and it can update this accordingly. So yeah, some really cool stuff there. And then it gives us a bit about creative strategy, a little bit of a creative testing, like action plan, gives us all of this, all the hooks, everything. It's really super detailed. Like this is great, handheld phone style UGC in a car or a home office. Like that's, yeah, it's not like, hey guys, welcome to Hormone. It's very, very native in that sense, gives us statics, all that kind of stuff. And then we can generate scripts as well, but we try not to do this because then our creative strategists don't really do too much. I love them bringing their own ways of working from their other agencies and bring it into ours. And then we can use this as like a final backup. And then, yeah, we've got our scripts here. And then we can click this review button to get it reviewed. I think I have to go for this one here. I'll just load that up once it does.
While it's loading, oh, no, you keep going.
Yeah. So this one here, we can see that this script that we made on Notion and, has all this information here. We've got, every bit of status update on it. So MK Ultra can produce daily stand-ups. It's crazy. And then it's pulling the script from here. So we've got this one here from female's perspective. Another thing I really want to flag, if you're ever selling a male's product, just put female in it. It cleans up. Yeah. Like, I don't know why. It's just something we've noticed over the past, 10,000 ads we've made. But yeah, this one here, we can see that works really well. And over here, we can see that it's, picked up on that. It aligns with this. It adds some suggestions as well. The CTA could be stronger, addressing the partner's role more directly. If you're watching your partner struggle and his GP won't help, don't wait like we did. Like that's such a stronger CTA than, if your partner's GP said he's fine, but you both know he's hot, take the quiz at Hormone. Like, yeah, I would much rather go with what they suggested. Another thing I want to show you as well, Jackie, is we've just figured out how to connect it to Meta. So every time one of our clients' competitors launches an ad, we start to bucket them into different bits of content. I feel very slack because, Pilot taught me everything I know, but they do happen to be one of the competitors mentioned here. What this essentially does is it looks at their top performing ads, transcribes everything in the ad, and then that way, if we ever do want to recreate a winning ad, I say that in quotations because even our company has seen brands put like $2 a day behind an ad because their competitors copy it because they think it's their longest running ad and think it's a winner. So, but what we can do is make like an assumption, if we pull 40 different ads and they all have a similar script, this one from Hims, we can just recreate it in one click, which is great. And then what this also does is it figures out what these two brands are talking about, what majority of their ads kind of fall into, and then what we should test first based on whether or not both of these brands have multiple tests behind that concept. Because then that gives us like a hypothesis that this is a winning concept, which is why, 40% of their longest running ads mention it. So, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, and then it also shows where they're weak, so what they miss out on that our research says to test. So then we can like kind of own that white space of that singular demographic.
Have you seen a change in performance of ads since you started using this?
We've literally like launched it internally like a week ago, but I am keeping like a wall of screenshots from like heads of marketing from Canva and Linktree saying, how much they love it. So so far the input's good. We've been having a lot of people ask for access, but I I don't want to be I don't want this to be like a full-time gig. This is good enough for us to make ads for our clients. And yeah, the thing that our clients are loving the most out of this, besides this, is we got a brief from Linktree. I think it should be on this one here. So we got a brief from Linktree, and they said, "Hey Gabe, can you find us, 20 podcast creators based in America with Linktree in their bio?" For our team internally to do that is a nightmare. We used to have 4 people full-time dedicated to finding Linktree creators, and that is such a ridiculous cost when you're trying to do that, right? So with MK Ultra, I built this tool. It like came up in my mind, and this was live like within the hour, Jackie. It was crazy. Put in the client's URL, the client's name, create a brief, female food creators in the US between these many followers, authentic home cooking, good lighting, blah, blah, blah. We can select how many creators, and we can also select whether or not we want larger creators. And then based on that brief, it gets a little pitch deck together. And, some of these aren't 100%, some of these are incorrect, but, you pop it into this, you share it with the client. And then I was like, it'd be pretty cool if we did like a little confetti thing. So I literally just said, "Hey, Claude, when they say yes, do confetti. Let's see if it works." Yeah, there we go. Cool. It's working. Yeah. It literally just finds the podcast creators online. It takes like 15 minutes. It takes no time. It used to take us weeks. Builds this dashboard, shows the average video plays from the latest 10 posts in case, they used to go viral a year ago and not anymore. And then pulls the video, pops it in here, links it to their, TikTok account. They've got a Linktree in their bio. Like for us to manually do that, ridiculous. And then that way we can just reach out to them. And then on the back end, what this looks like for our team is we can turn it into a like little Trello board. I think on this one here, let's see. Yeah, cool. So responses, outreach board. And then our team just comes in here, copies a personalized message to that person, clicks on their TikTok and just shoots it through. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Nuts. I don't know how.
So this has changed a lot even since you sent the first version of this to me like a week ago.
Yeah, right. I think when I sent it, it was like white or something and had like 3 tabs. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk money. Like, how much has this cost you altogether, do you think? Just on kind of Claude Code.
The learning curve at the beginning was like 2K wasted on Lovable because I didn't realize they charge you a credit per time you message it, and I messaged it for 18 hours straight. So that was expensive. Then I built it on this. The weird thing is, Jackie, I don't know if it's like meant to be or something, I don't know, but if you use Claude Code on Warp, it uses your Claude subscription, and we're already paying for like a $300 per month subscription, so we have like a boatload of credits. It barely ever runs out. But then when I moved back to Claude Bot, OpenClaw, that was expensive. That was really expensive. So what happened was it just got stuck on a loop for one of the part of the processes where it was scraping the internet. We had this scraper called Serper AI. I think it scraped like 140,000 pages. The bill was ridiculous. And then Claude, it was using the most premium version of Claude. I didn't realize that it wasn't using the subscription, so it was just burning through API credits. I set up a automation where every day when it hit like $100 US worth of credits, it would notify me. It didn't work, so I just thought we never hit $100 worth of credits until I actually checked the account. That was like a 4 or 5 grand mistake. But this version that you're seeing now was built on Claude in Warp, and it was just using our subscription, which is ridiculous. Yeah.
Amazing. So $300 a month.
Yeah, if that. We barely even touch it. I'll see how much we're up to at the moment. Let's go here. So we're on the max plan. If we go to settings, usage.
When you think about ROI on this, like I'm guessing there's a mix of cost saved and like extra revenue generated. Like how are
Yeah.
you thinking about how this changes what exposure does and how many clients you can look after and things like that?
Sure. I think the like number one thing I care about when it comes to clients is like reminding my team that we purely exist to service clients, right? Like if clients didn't need agencies, we wouldn't exist. So everything that I hated about agencies, I try to fix while, running exposure. And a lot of those things were like visibility and like speed. This has been a massive unlock when it comes to speed because, we're working super hard internally. We have teams overseas that are working night shifts so we can chat with American creators. But, clients don't necessarily see someone sitting on a screen for like 40 hours in 1 week trying to scrape TikTok to find creators. So, that part of the process always got lost in translation. So genuinely, Jackie, like with this, I was thinking about it and I was like, am I spending too many credits? And I was like, if I purely look at the speed that it brings to our clients, it's worth way more. If I look at, saving 4 full-time employees searching the internet for 2 weeks for pitching creators, not even onboarding them, it's already paid itself off in 2 weeks. Yeah, it's definitely well worth it. Yeah.
And you were talking a little bit earlier about like creating a moat with this. How are you thinking about that? Like, I know you don't want to make this its own product that you sell to other people and you want to just use it as a way to build an incredible agency. But I'm curious as to how you're thinking about how to, I guess, reap the benefits of it most effectively.
For sure. I think at the moment, this is like one of my little side projects. I put it in quotation marks because I've been staying up to like 3 a.m. every single night playing with it. But I think genuinely, Jackie, is like exposure makes the like money for these like kind of tests to happen, these side projects, these apps. If it gets to a point where, like right now, every single client we've shown it to has asked for access or said, where can I sign up? Not realizing it's our own internal tool. But genuinely, like I think the way this kind of moves is we keep making it better and better and better off client data. If anything, it's being used as like a retention kind of standpoint, because this has a lot of their ad performance data. It has a lot of, the biggest advertisers in Australia has ad data, and it kind of takes that guessing equation out of the ad creation part. So I think clients really love that there's one, I guess, singular point of data that they can bounce all their ideas off and they can get access to. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in 2 minds about it because we have been asked by a lot of people to like get it live. I'm not technical enough to run it out.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've built a bunch of stuff myself, and I'm just on the edge of scared of like trying to make it hardened for like real people to use in the real world.
And I hear all these horror stories of like credits, like, I don't know, someone getting access to it and just rinsing it for credits. And like, right now it's working perfectly. I don't want to muck it up like I did 4 days ago. Yeah.
What do you want to build next?
I think right now, if I can automate every like kind of dog work that anyone does in our agency and get that as automated as possible, I'd love to like see if I can translate this to another industry. My dad's got a company, he does like events and exhibitions. If I could see this, like a version of this working for them internally, that would kind of give it more of a, I guess, like validation that it can be taken into other industries. Because right now it works when we have like a lot of great information about a client. But I think like the way we've set it up, and even now that I know, you can't say a 3-word prompt, you have to give it a paragraph so it actually knows what you're talking about. Yeah, I think it's very easy to build now that I've like spent a lot of money learning it. Yeah.
And what would be your advice for other people who are just getting started? I mean, you think about yourself like at that lunch that we had, where you just like started experimenting, but still pretty new to this, and it's only been like a couple months, if that. Like, what would be your advice to other people getting started?
I think The best bit of advice I got is like on above told me to give Claude Code this like I think it's like I can't remember the technical word for it, but it's like a whole template of exactly what you want to build. And the best way to do that is just record yourself for an hour, feed it to ChatGPT or Claude, tell it to turn it into a document for Claude Code to build an app off the back of that. And that has been the biggest unlock. Because like if you go through all of my messages prior to building this with AI tools, it was always like half sentences. And then I realized like I'm getting a shit output because I'm doing a very half-assed job with the input. So I think anyone who wants to build something like this, just like take your time with how you talk to it because you will get a much better result. You know, if you give it like a short sentence and expect it to build this, it will never work. But if you know, record yourself for an hour, talk about all your issues, everything you're facing, all of that kind of stuff, and you tell Claude, hey, I need a .md file to, you know, load into Claude Code so it can fix every issue I'm dealing with. Could you turn it into that? And then it has like, I got to ask him for like the actual word. It's like a in
PRD?
PRD. That's it. Yeah, I was about to
Yeah.
call it PDP. Yeah, yeah, PRD. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So
Product requirement doc for everyone
yeah,
who isn't used to the acronyms.
literally. So yeah, build that, feed that in, and even with that, like record yourself for an hour and then tell Claude, hey, can you turn this conversation into a PID doc for, you know, Claude Code? And it will do such an incredible job. And I think like as well, don't do what I did and stay up to like 4 a.m. every single night because there will be a point of diminishing returns and you will like undo a lot of good work between that like 2 to 4 a.m. timeline. Yeah.
Oh, well, look, is there anything else that you think people should know to before they get started?
I think just like everything, you know, you never ever want to get into a holding pattern where you're like consuming information because it makes you feel like you're doing something. I would just set aside a budget, figure out, you know, how much you're happy to lose, not trying to get you onto gambling or anything, but just like have a set aside learning budget. And that could be like $500 a month. It could be 10 grand a month and just go, I'm going to use this to burn through credits, all that kind of stuff. And also like, please do a tiny bit of research before you get started because it will save you a lot of expensive mistakes. There are other tools you can use for like talking to the chat that will keep it cheaper. But yeah, I just went all out. Yeah.
Nice. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. And yeah, if anyone's looking for performance creative, come to Gabe in Exposure.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Always great.